What happens when a Hollywood heartthrob, known for his captivating charm and intense screen presence, chooses kindness, compassion, and inner peace over fame? Richard Gere is more than just the iconic face from Pretty Woman. He's a man whose quiet strength and deep spirituality have shaped not only his career, but his life's purpose. While most stars chased the spotlight, Richard often turned away from it, choosing instead to explore the silence within. His journey is not just about blockbuster success, but about searching for truth, practicing compassion, and living with grace. This is the story of a man who didn't just act in romantic dramas, he lived one with heart, humility, and healing at its core. Richard Tiffany Gere was born on August 31, 1949 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and grew up in the small town of Syracuse, New York. His father, George Gere, worked as an insurance agent, and his mother, Doris Ann, was a homemaker. The Gere family was humble, hardworking, and deeply rooted in values of kindness and discipline. Richard, the second of 5 children, grew up in a modest home where music, reading, and curiosity were encouraged. As a child, he showed early signs of brilliance, not only in academics, but also in creativity. He was a gifted gymnast and a self-taught musician who could play the trumpet and the piano. Despite being quiet and reserved, young Richard had a depth in his eyes and a fire in his spirit. He wasn't drawn to acting immediately. His love for storytelling and human emotion developed over time, shaped by his surroundings, his love of literature, and a yearning to understand the world more deeply. Richard's upbringing was a beautiful mix of simplicity and soulful learning. His parents were deeply supportive, encouraging each of their children to explore their interests freely. His father, Homer, was known in the community for his integrity and generous nature, qualities Richard would later mirror in both his career and humanitarian work. The family didn't have much wealth, but what they had in abundance was love, books, and music. Dinner conversations were filled with thought-provoking ideas, and weekends often included community activities and service. This environment helped shape Richard into a man who values substance over success. He was never interested in being just a celebrity. Instead, he wanted to make a meaningful difference, a seed that was planted during these early years at home. It's this grounded beginning that laid the emotional and spiritual foundation for everything Richard Gere would later become. Richard was an exceptionally bright student from an early age. He attended North Syracuse Central High School, where he was not only academically gifted, but also a standout athlete. He excelled in gymnastics and even earned a scholarship to University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he initially majored in philosophy before shifting his focus to drama. This shift wasn't random. Something deeper was calling to him. While studying, Richard began exploring the power of human emotion, philosophy, and the stage as a tool for expression and transformation. It was here that his love for storytelling through acting truly blossomed. He never finished his degree, but his brief time at university laid the intellectual and emotional groundwork that would serve him throughout his career. Even then, Richard was more interested in exploring truth and consciousness than chasing fame, traits that would define both his acting choices and his personal life.
Gere's entry into acting was not a glamorous red carpet moment. It was built on theater, patience, and persistence. After leaving college, he moved to New York City, where he worked in stage productions and off-Broadway shows. In 1973, he earned attention in London for his role in Grease, playing Danny Zuko long before John Travolta made the role famous on film. Gere was serious about his craft, often immersing himself completely into his roles and choosing characters that were layered, conflicted, and emotionally raw. His early film roles in Looking for Mr. Goodbar in 1977 and Days of Heaven 1978 gained him quiet acclaim, but it wasn't until the early 1980s that his cinematic presence truly exploded. Even in these early years, directors noted Richard's ability to combine deep vulnerability with magnetic screen presence, a rare gift that would soon make him a household name. Richard Gere's true breakthrough came in 1980 with American Gigolo, directed by Paul Schrader. The film didn't just make him a star, it redefined the idea of the male romantic lead. As Julian Kay, a high-end escort torn between charm and emptiness, Gere delivered a performance that was both sensual and sorrowful. He wasn't just a pretty face. He brought depth, mystery, and pain to the role, earning him admiration from critics and the adoration of fans. The film's success catapulted him into international fame and turned him into a cultural icon almost overnight. His fashion, particularly the iconic Armani suits, became trends. But behind the spotlight, Richard remained humble, thoughtful, and cautious of the fame rushing his way. American Gigolo was not just a career milestone. It was the moment the world stopped and took notice of a star who was different, sensitive, intelligent, and unforgettable. Following the breakout success of American Gigolo, Richard Gere's ascent in Hollywood was rapid and undeniable. The early 1980s saw him take on roles that weren't just popular, they became cultural landmarks. In 1982, he starred in An Officer and a Gentleman, portraying Zach Mayo, a hardened military trainee who learns to open his heart. The film was a massive box office hit and earned Gere a permanent place in cinematic history. Audiences fell in love with not just his looks, but his emotional range, tough on the outside, but beautifully human within. Then came Pretty Woman in 1990, alongside Julia Roberts. The film became a global phenomenon, and Richard's portrayal of Edward Lewis, a lonely billionaire learning to love, captured the imagination of millions. His chemistry with Julia Roberts became the stuff of legend. These roles didn't just define Gere's career, they redefined the romantic hero archetype itself. Elegant, intelligent, and introspective, Richard Gere wasn't just acting, he was revealing a new kind of masculinity, one that wasn't afraid to feel. While Richard Gere's on-screen romances lit up the big screen, his personal life was marked by deeper complexities. In the early 1990s, he began dating supermodel Cindy Crawford, and the two married in 1991. For the world, it was a fairy tale pairing, Hollywood's most charming man and the world's most beautiful woman. But behind the glamour, differences in lifestyles and pressures of fame weighed heavily on their relationship, and they eventually divorced in 1995. Gere kept much of his private life out of the media, valuing solitude and depth over publicity. In 2002, he married Carrie Lowell, with whom he had a son, Homer. However, the couple separated in 2013. In 2018, Gere found love again and married Alejandra Silva, with whom he shares 2 young children. Through all the heartbreaks and fresh starts, Gere remained grounded, believing that real love isn't just about romance, it's about patience, understanding, and peace. As Richard Gere grew older, so did his characters. He gracefully transitioned into roles that reflected his own personal growth, thoughtful, philosophical, and emotionally complex. In films like Unfaithful, 2002, Chicago, 2002, and The Hoax, 2006, Gere showed audiences that he was far more than a romantic lead. He was a serious actor willing to explore darker, more layered parts of the human condition. His performance in Chicago earned him a Golden Globe Award and reintroduced him to a younger generation. But unlike many actors who chase fame or fight aging, Gere leaned into maturity. He became more selective with roles, often choosing indie films like Arbitrage and Time Out of Mind, stories that asked deeper questions and invited empathy. His career became a mirror to his soul, quiet, profound, and fearless in embracing truth, however uncomfortable. Through this evolution, Gere proved that lasting greatness doesn't come from fame, it comes from growth. Richard Gere's life took a transformative turn in the late 1970s when he discovered Buddhism. This wasn't just a passing interest, it became a spiritual anchor that shaped his worldview. Deeply moved by the teachings of the Dalai Lama, Richard began to practice Tibetan Buddhism with great devotion. He once said, "The clearer you are, the more loving you are, and that's what Buddhism has brought to my life." This spiritual journey inspired him to live more consciously, letting go of ego, attachment, and fame's illusions. In 1991, he founded the Gere Foundation, a nonprofit committed to human rights, healthcare, and education in Tibet. He has worked tirelessly to advocate for Tibetan freedom, often putting his own Hollywood career at risk by speaking out against powerful governments. From visiting refugee camps to funding HIV and AIDS programs, Gere's activism is not for the camera. It's rooted in genuine compassion. To him, being a celebrity is not a status, but a responsibility. Despite his global fame and wealth, Richard Gere leads a surprisingly simple, elegant, and grounded lifestyle. He's never been drawn to Hollywood excess or flashy attention. He has owned several beautiful properties over the years, including a majestic estate in Pound Ridge, New York, set on 50-plus acres of rolling meadows, woods, and lakes. That property, complete with a private island and horse stables, reflected Gere's love for peace, nature, and reflection. He later sold it and moved to a more intimate home with his wife Alejandra Silva in North Salem, New York, where he enjoys gardening, meditation, and raising his young children away from media chaos. As for cars, Richard favors eco-conscious vehicles, often seen driving hybrid Lexuses and Audis, and in recent years a Tesla. He's not interested in material status symbols. What matters to him is comfort, sustainability, and emotional serenity. His homes, like his spirit, are serene sanctuaries built not for showing off, but for tuning in.
Richard Gere's relationship with the media has always been respectful but distant. Unlike many celebrities, he has never sought the spotlight for attention's sake. He prefers interviews that focus on his work, his spiritual beliefs, or global issues, not gossip. His humility, honesty, and measured tone have earned him a reputation as one of the few actors who have successfully navigated fame without losing themselves. In Hollywood, he's respected for his wisdom. In humanitarian circles, he's admired for his heart. Gere rarely uses social media and often chooses silence over noise. Yet his absence speaks volumes. He doesn't need constant visibility. His work, his activism, and his calm presence leave a lasting impression. Fans and fellow actors often describe him as a gentleman with depth, someone whose charisma is matched only by his compassion. Richard Gere is not just well known, he's well respected, and that's a far greater legacy. Beyond the fame and the silver screen, Richard Gere holds a treasure chest of fascinating skills and stories most fans never hear about. For one, he's an exceptionally talented musician, a self-taught pianist and trumpeter who once composed original music for the 1990 film Pretty Woman. In fact, the piano scene in the movie, that was completely improvised by Gere. Few people know that he's also fluent in multiple musical styles, from jazz to classical, and often plays to relax or think creatively. Another little-known fact, Gere is a black belt in martial arts, which he studied during his younger days, not for movies, but to deepen self-discipline and focus. He's also an accomplished photographer and has exhibited his black and white photos in galleries, with themes centered on human dignity and spiritual stillness. And finally, he's never been nominated for an Oscar, despite his immense contribution to cinema. But for Richard, awards were never the goal. Real success, he once said, is when your life and your spirit feel aligned. Richard Gere's legacy extends far beyond the roles he played. It lives in the hearts he touched, the causes he championed, and the quiet courage he displayed. He reshaped the definition of a leading man, not just through good looks or romantic gestures, but with empathy, inner depth, and intellectual elegance. He opened Hollywood's eyes to Tibet. He reminded audiences that kindness matters, and he proved that stardom doesn't have to drown out your soul. Countless younger actors cite him as an influence, not just for his acting technique, but for his grace, spiritual wisdom, and fearless authenticity. He is a man who chose love over ego, peace over power, and meaning over money. In doing so, he gave the world not just movies, but moments that last a lifetime. In a world full of noise, be someone who chooses silence. In a world chasing fame, be someone who chooses truth. Richard Gere's story is not just a biography, it's a reflection of strength that is quiet, of love that is patient, of a man who lived not just for himself, but for a greater purpose. And now we ask you, what's your purpose? What makes your soul come alive? If Richard Gere's story inspired even a single thought in your heart, we invite you to share that light with others. Like, share, and subscribe to My Dream, where stories don't just entertain, they awaken.